finding which techniques work the best for you and your lifestyle is going to be very unique to yourself. But some of the most generic.
Welcome to Rebel Wellness, the go-to podcast for realigning and revitalizing your health and well-being. I'm your host, Kaylee, also known as Coach Kales. I'm a holistic health educator, certified nutritionist, and fitness professional of nearly a decade. I'm stoked to have you with us. You just joined a community of amazing souls who are ready to break free from the confines of the often outdated and confusing health advice all around us. Living in a world overwhelmed by quick fix diets and unrealistic body standards, us rebels stand for change. If you're like me, you're exhausted with the confusion and polarization plaguing the social media health scene. My mission is to empower you to step beyond today's diet culture, adopting a holistic health approach paired with the foundations of science for lasting, well-rounded wellness. Through teaching you how to tune in and embrace your mind, body, and soul, we'll reject one-size-fits-all solutions, realigning you on a better path that honors your unique needs and values. With new episodes weekly, this podcast is your sanctuary for deep wellness exploration, featuring expert advice, real-life stories, and a true commitment to your growth. Your journey to better health and simplicity in life begins now. Let's jump right in. Hello, Rebel Soul. How are you doing? Welcome back to the podcast. If you are new here, I am so glad you found me and this podcast. I would definitely say that this is a great topic that is super pertinent to most of us these days. I have been talking about in past podcasts how I've been recently diving deeper into working on healing my adrenal fatigue. Some people just call it burnout. Some people call it HPA axis dysfunction. There's a lot of different names, but it is a clinical issue. It is not something that is just a random term that gurus made up. It's called that because you can run labs and see your adrenals not operating optimally or overworking. That's the same thing. Overworking or underworking is not being optimal. So for me, I have spent the last several months diving really deep, getting all the tests, almost all the tests. I really would like to get what's called a Dutch test, which is a dried urine test, to get a little bit more of an understanding of how my body is metabolizing and detoxing things, because that's the great information that you can get from your urine, because it's the end result of liquids, vitamins, minerals, and all that jazz going through your body and getting filtered out. So it's really important to kind of know that your blood, urine, and spit all tell different stories. And so I started my journey with Your Hormone Balance. I have the link in my show notes if you want to check them out. It's been an immensely helpful place to start with affordable saliva testing to get my base sex hormones as well as cortisol checked up on. And you get the most accurate understanding of your cortisol picture from saliva only. It does not come from blood, because you need to take collections throughout the day at certain times before your meals, right after you wake up and right before bed. And what this does is, for me, it told me that the reason I yawn in the middle of the day between like noon and 2, and I'm fully crashing energetically, is because I have been operating on this adrenal fatigue, where literally my adrenals kind of just fatigue in the afternoon when they should just be nicely tapering off. And then I get even weirder. I get a weird little spike in the evening, which is very common for people struggling with HPA axis dysfunction, because things are just wonky. Things are not communicating properly. So for me, when I saw that, then I decided, okay, let's go get some blood testing, which I got through Merrick Health, because I know what blood tests I wanted to run, but a lot of people can get it through their functional medicine practitioner, naturopathic doctor. You can get some of them tested by your general practitioner, but unfortunately, usually any of your doctors through healthcare are not going to run a lot of the more in-depth levels and numbers of certain minerals, hormones, and all of that you would want to see. So that's why I recommend usually working with like a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic doctor, because they'll go a little deeper, and they'll oftentimes, not all the times, oftentimes treat you less like a number and more like a human. It is kind of rough out there. I think we do not have enough practitioners for how many humans need care at this point. And so this is where it's great that you are taking your health seriously and listening to resources such as this podcast to try to get ahead on it for yourself and just be a lot more aware, because advocacy for yourself in your healthcare is going to be what makes or breaks your longevity, your happiness in life, and, just mindfulness and connection to your body, which I think is extremely important. And that is why I have been walking the walk. So this year for me, a lot of you may already know, but if you don't, this year I turned 30. And it was very important to me to actually step back and, like I just said, walk the walk and make sure that I am prioritizing my health over work or my clients or, all that kind of stuff. Because it's really easy as a giver to give too much and not realize that that's bad. You almost start to believe, especially because society teaches us, that giving more of yourself makes you more valuable, makes you more worthy of love, all these different little inner deep things that come out from why we are givers. Some people just like the fact that they feel needed. There's a lot of different reasons for things. Ultimately, for me, I just really liked to have impact and help people answer these questions and problems they had and access their best health or get into a better mindset or, a variety of things, get stronger. And so I realized as time was going on, especially this year, which a lot of my clients over 30 would always tell me that when you hit 30, like your engine light goes on. And people say all these different ages, but most of the time people were saying 30 is when they noticed like things just weren't recovering as fast and more issues were happening and all these different things. And that was definitely true. I think like the morning I woke up when I turned 30, I had like a massive crick in my neck. And I mean, my dog took off after a chipmunk and I managed to hold onto his leash the entire time. But usually, I mean, at times when he's done that before, my neck would not be all busted. And I woke up so busted that morning and I was like, dang it, all of my friends were right. But with all of that said, I would say that my adrenal fatigue symptoms were screaming at me. It was becoming very obvious that I needed to listen and I needed to prioritize myself and I needed to show, my following on Instagram and my clients that you can survive taking care of yourself. And frankly, you can only survive if you finally like prioritize and take care of yourself at least as much of the time as possible. 80-20, 90-10, whatever would work out for you. It still needs to be the highest percentages you taking care of yourself, or else you're just going to run yourself to the ground. And that's not good. And it's not necessary. We don't have to just let ourselves crumble apart for, the bigger victory of some sort of honor of not honoring ourselves. It's kind of ironic in a way, or coincidental, whatever word it would be. But I would say for those of you wondering, like, what symptoms did I start to notice? I definitely noticed like body aches, like my joints were kind of angry and inflamed and achy, frankly. My muscles were not recovering from my workouts, and I didn't have the energy to go to the gym for the first time in the last year. And this was all mostly noticed, I'd say most of June 2023 until around February 2024. This is when I started to really start to notice some things were off. So my muscles weren't recovering well. I had like zero stamina in my workouts. And I do not recommend anybody ever just use pre-workout every day if they don't have natural energy to some extent, because that'll just make you overtrain, because you need those feedback cues from your body because it's telling you something. It's telling you if you're under-rested, if you're underfed, if you're underhydrated, and you can't feel those things if you're hopped up on a bunch of pre-workout crack stuff. So I noticed that my workouts were really lackluster. I didn't really want to do more than like 9 sets, and I wasn't prioritizing the gym either, default of not feeling like I wanted to go to the gym. And I had definitely a lot of brain fog that was always creeping in. And even like, I'll be real with you guys, sometimes like putting together words and phrases in a good manner for the podcast in that chapter was really tough. And I had no idea like what could have been sabotaging until I kind of really started to notice it, and then be like, what could be sabotaging my brain, And more than just the adrenal fatigue situation going on with my hormones in my body, But also I had built a bad habit of kind of weekend cocktails. I had gotten into, Instagram has all these cool little cocktail people and they make these really aesthetic recipes. And so I would be so stressed throughout the week that on the weekend I'd be like, I want to make this one or I want to make a version of this one. And I'd have like maybe like 1 to 3 cocktails a weekend, which I totally know that that's not that much, but it's enough to throw off your brain and your recovery and your sleep quality and all that stuff that all just melds in together every time you have a single ounce of liquor, including a beer, including wine, all that kind of stuff, especially in the female body. This is your female body is much more sensitive, especially if you're naturally cycling. So for me, I started to realize way too much alcohol, all this different stuff. I wasn't sleeping as good, and alcohol causes you to not sleep well. And then it spikes a cortisol response in the morning for this kind of deficit that happens with your serotonin, I believe, or dopamine. It's one of those. And so your body's response is to pump more cortisol. So then I was having way more cortisol in the morning just from those habits. And then it would crash in the afternoon and then it would weirdly spike again in the evening a bit. So I'd be like wired and tired. Sometimes we call that wired and tired. And so all of those things I started to really notice. And those are all symptoms of adrenal fatigue and adrenal fatigue getting like too far along. The other thing I definitely noticed was I had a lot more sugary cravings. I wouldn't say a ton of salty cravings, but I absolutely had sugar cravings. Like I wanted to make a little cookie pizookie thing every night, sometimes when it was like, especially my luteal phase, aka the week preceding your period. But then I would come out of it and I still would want little treats here and there, And I was like, something feels really off and it must be like my gut is off, but I'm not eating like that bad or that different. I just constantly want something sweet too. And then I started to experience insomnia around my cycle more noticeably. And I definitely had a decrease in my libido. I would say I noticed that from like December until like February when I started to actually take action. And I definitely had stubborn belly fat, weight gain, and bouts of depression. And I didn't really talk about this a ton with a lot of people. And I think that the conversation of like bouts of depression versus like existing in depression, they're kind of like different. It's like a spectrum. I feel like depression is a spectrum. And a lot of people, for some reason, I've noticed kind of flex on, well, I exist in depression, so you don't know what it feels like. But it's like, I wouldn't take away anybody's experience just because they don't have it as long or how many days in a row. When you experience it and it sucks every time, And so those things were starting to become noticeable. And I've always known myself to be pretty good at like working myself through issues or things that I've been going through. And I'm like, why do I just feel like extra not motivated? I feel lost and confused, all this different stuff. And like I started to notice the weight on the scale finally go up after roughly 4 years of staying in the same zone for casually. Like I didn't diet at all the last 4 years, and it's been magnificent. I plan to do another podcast episode on that and how you can achieve that for yourself too in the future, but probably during hot take summer. However, I do think it's really important that you guys know that these are ways of kind of knowing something's off with your body. If all of a sudden the weight on the scale is giving you feedback that something's increasing a lot, and if you don't feel like you've been particularly eating a lot of junk and like drinking a lot and all this stuff, like if you're not really over consuming calories, but the scale is going up, that's typically a sign or a symptom that something hormonally is off in your body. So that's really important to keep an eye on, and that's where the scale is definitely feedback for keeping an eye on that stuff. And I would say I usually weigh myself casually once every 2 weeks or so, unless I'm specifically, trying to follow macros or something. But that's a good way to kind of keep an eye, because if in 2 weeks now all of a sudden you're 3 pounds up, and then like another 2-3 weeks like you're another 4 something pounds up, it's like, okay, something's off, especially if you have not been overeating. So all of those little things were feedback to me that hopefully is helpful for you guys to hear. If any of that resonates, there's other stuff that could happen to you as well that I didn't specifically like experience. Like I don't think I had a sensitive like poor stress response. Like if stressors happened, I could usually manage myself pretty well. But that's something that can be a sign for some people, is just the drop of a hat could piss somebody off and they can go off or whatever. And a really poor immune system is a huge sign that you have adrenal fatigue, because that will affect your gut, and your gut health is your immune system health. And that can be a huge issue. So with everything I just kind of painted in that picture for you, I also wanted to talk today mainly about some of my habits personally that I've been doing to try to manage my cortisol better and to try to recover my hormone balance. So there's some specific things that I have been implementing that were recommended to me from, I got to do a follow-up call with one of the practitioners through the Your Hormone Balance team. And I also have spoken with, I have fortunately a good network. So I've spoken with other past clients and such who were doctors and naturopathic doctors about some of their thoughts and tips and advice, as well as, my usual, did a bunch of research and kind of found some other things that I would like to share with you so that you can implement for yourself. But popping in real quick, as usual, come join us in our community on Instagram at Kaylee Loren or at Rebel Wellness Podcast for the specific podcast page that we're growing. And it is going to be your best bet for getting a lot more in-depth connection and learning opportunities through my posts and my stories. Especially, I like to share a lot on stories. I do share a lot of talks and my takes on kind of different things that I see going on in the nutrition space or fitness space that I want to help you navigate, as well as a lot of my best advice for all things health and wellness. So that's definitely the best way to connect with us right now as a community, as well as join our wellness newsletter on coachkales.com. That's going to be such a good one time a month wellness resource for you. I highly recommend you come and join it. There's no junk mail or any of that stuff. And I really try my best to make sure that I pack in only the good stuff into that newsletter. And this last one, I put in, I think, too much stuff, like in a way where it was so long that it cut off when it got to everyone's inboxes. You had to like select expand whole message or whatever. And I was like, maybe I put too much good stuff. But the responses have been great. So I'm not so mad. Maybe I won't adjust it just because of how emails operate these days. But come join us. I would love to see your name, say hello. And of course, you are always welcome to shoot me topics that you would like to hear or just some questions that I can answer for you, either via DM or on a podcast episode if I find it to be a broad question that a lot of people could benefit from. Okay, so let's slide into the tips that I would give you. And I also want to, as always, give you a little bit of science. So here we go. Okay, so just a reminder, and in case you do not already know, what is cortisol? So cortisol is a steroid hormone. So a lot of us think of steroids as like what bodybuilders inject themselves with to make their muscles big, but that is not the limitations of to what steroid hormones are. They definitely are steroid hormones because most of the time people are taking testosterone replacement therapy or other androgenic hormones. And that'll help with muscle. However, specifically cortisol is produced by your two adrenal glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And when you are stressed, increased cortisol is released into your bloodstream to help balance things back out, because having the right balance of cortisol is super essential for your health, because producing too much or too little can cause lots of health problems like the ones I just told you about. But the thing that's really important, I want to make sure you know, is that cortisol has like a lot of important functions in the body, and it acts on a lot of different parts of your body. So some of the things that cortisol is beneficial for or plays a role in is your body's response to stress or danger, fight or flight. And it is also your body's metabolism of glucose. So it plays a big role in insulin resistance. Glucose, aka blood sugar elevation or extended amounts of blood sugar elevation or roller coastering, like spiking, dropping, will have a negative effect long term on your insulin. And that's where people become insulin resistant, which is also known as type 2 diabetes. Or more commonly nowadays, we're seeing a lot of PCOS in females, which is an issue with the ovaries due to hormone imbalances as well. So there's a lot of things kind of connected here with diseases and these different hormone imbalances. So that's why hormones actually do matter quite a bit, that we really should understand where we're at, especially if we're experiencing symptoms of imbalance, right? So the other thing that cortisol does is it actually helps control your blood pressure, and it also reduces your inflammation. What? I know a lot of people would assume that cortisol increases your inflammation, but in fact, cortisol reduces inflammation, which is very interesting because it is actually something that is meant to be a part of your healthy natural response to perceived threats, but it also matters the levels of it so that it can help bring things back down. So, as you can probably infer, if you're just shooting too much cortisol, you're probably going to be in a state where you have a lot of inflammation because the cortisol is coming out to try to reduce inflammation, and then it's not getting reduced for a variety of reasons. It could be nutrition, it could be lifestyle, it could be work, it could be, your nervous system from trauma or whatever. And if you have constant inflammation, your cortisol is going to try to help that out. And if it can't, and then it's just constantly spitting out, you could end up where you have adrenal fatigue, where not enough cortisol is now produced, or it's produced at the wrong times of your day, et cetera, et cetera. So I really want to make sure that you guys kind of know a little bit about what cortisol does, because that's helpful for understanding why it can be key to reduce it or manage it better so that it's only showing up to the party when it's necessary. But I also talk a lot more about cortisol and such in my Cortisol and Coffee episode, which just came out. It was episode 68. So there's a lot of other goodies in there for you as far as this conversation goes. I would check that one out next. So the other really common angle that tends to happen with chronic stress is that it can cause an increase in your body's stress response mechanism, which can lead to hyperresponsiveness, adrenal dysregulation. So a lot of people also consider that like HPA axis dysfunction, and it's essentially where your pituitary gland, which is in your brain, and that's what tells your body to, or your adrenal glands rather, to produce cortisol, there's a dysregulation there. So something's going off. It's like a short circuit. Like it's not going properly. They're not communicating well. And that is me. Oh, yay. Probably they haven't officially the practitioners I've talked to have diagnosed me with that based off of my obvious labs. However, there could be a multitude of different things going on. Who knows? But that's the direction that I am going in because that's what matches my symptoms and my labs the most. So therefore, we're going for it, right? And first, let's just quickly talk about the most common advice that's given for cortisol dysregulation. You're always going to hear things like, the most common blanket statement is people are just going to say stress management techniques, which yes, that's very accurate. But finding which techniques work the best for you and your lifestyle and your, everything is going to be very unique to yourself. But some of the most generic things that people always say to do that are definitely scientifically backed and definitely positive, which is probably why they're the most commonly said, is doing sunlight exposure. So specifically in the morning, especially not wearing sunglasses, getting sunlight into your eyes, and doing a lot of breathing techniques to try to help you regulate your nervous system through kind of massaging your vagal nerve. So you have your vagal nerve that is right behind your diaphragm. And when you're doing deep breathing, you're able to actually massage that as you breathe, and it helps regulate your nervous system. So that's why for people who are having anxiety or panic attacks, they put them through like box breathing or variations thereof of breathing techniques to help naturally regulate their stress response. And that's something as simple as, that's something that I definitely love to do, where you do a big 4 to 8-count breath in, take one extra little sip of air, and then sigh it out. There's a lot of scientific literature that has actually been researching the benefits of just sighing in general, but you don't want to walk around just sighing everywhere. But when you would spend maybe a full minute or 2 minutes sitting and being mindful and doing that breathing technique and doing a sigh out, those are great ways to naturally try to regulate yourself better. And you can always do this when you're feeling overwhelmed at work or you realize that you've been kind of slouching over, breathing really shallow. One of the biggest signs that I've talked to like a ton of my clients about over the years, when you are breathing shallow for too long, common for all of the desk workers, is you will start to yawn a lot or sometimes even like burp a lot when you start to breathe heavier again, because your diaphragm is like a little bit undertrained and you're bringing a lot more oxygen in all of a sudden. And so you can kind of get weird little symptoms back like that. And that would be a sign that you are not breathing deep enough throughout your day. And you can actually have negative effects on your hormones through apnea, which apnea is not just not breathing when you sleep. It's actually just like holding your breath and not releasing enough of your carbon dioxide throughout the day. And that is over time actually going to cause hormone imbalances for a variety of reasons. We're not going to get into the science there. I believe Huberman actually has some really good episodes on that. So you can check that out. That's definitely an area that can cause a lot of cortisol dysregulation that we don't realize. So deeper breathing is actually a very good one. And that's kind of coincides with meditation. I know meditation is really hard for people, but there's other variations of meditation. You can do walking meditations, listening to a specific walking meditation podcast, or you can just simply walk in nature and become mindful, observe and name everything you see around you. And that's how you can pull yourself into being really present. And you can also do body scans, they call them, where you like lay on your back and you listen to cues of somebody saying, feel the top of your head and la, la, la. And what does it feel like in your fingertips? And all that stuff. And those could be really great ways to get present and connect with your body as well. One of the best ways to practice sitting in stillness meditation is focusing on an object that is like a candle. Like my favorite is watching a candle flame because it's interesting for me to focus on, but it is also something that is not just stare at the wall or something like that. And anytime my thoughts start to drift onto like, what do I want to eat for dinner or whatever, you can catch that thought and kind of picture putting it into the flame and then refocusing on the flame and thinking about the color and thinking about how it moves, that kind of stuff. Those are my best tips for meditation, guys, because I know that it can be so hard and it is tough to carve out time, because in our free time, we'd rather like scroll on TikTok or whatever because it's more exciting than sitting in stillness. But I do recommend, if you're somebody struggling with cortisol dysregulation, swapping the two of those is probably in your best interest if you actually really want to get progress on your health. Okay, some of the other common advice that comes from it would be reducing your accelerants or your depressants as far as substances go. So of course that involves like a lot of different drugs and things, but I would say coffee and caffeine is one of the top common things that is an accelerant in our day-to-day that we would really not want to get out of hand with. So I would say less than 100 milligrams of coffee, or of caffeine rather, a day. So that's roughly just like one standard 6 to 8 ounce cup of coffee. And again, listen to episode 68 for my best advice on what kind of coffee, or switching yourself entirely and weaning off down to decaffeinated tea, decaffeinated coffee, all that jazz, because it's going to be one of those things where letting your body remove other things that could incite more cortisol is going to be best for you letting your body kind of re-regulate itself. So I know it kind of sucks and you don't have to do it forever, but while you're in this healing journey that can be anywhere from 6 to 12 months or maybe even more, depends on how long you've been running on empty, that would be a really good thing for you to remove from your lifestyle. And alcohol for sure. I know it's so lame. It is very lame. But I will say that ever since I've cut alcohol to like once or twice a month, if that, things have improved like exponentially with even the weirdest way, guys. This is like the randomest thing that I have observed for myself is that like my face is returning back to my more youthful looks. It's kind of hard to describe, but like things aren't looking as tired and cute like they were for a while there. I don't know how to describe that any differently. If you're somebody who's noticed that when you've increased drinking or more alcohol, that your face has gotten like more haggard and not as attractive in different ways, like thin, crepey eyelids and thin lips and more wrinkles and dull skin color. Everything has been like reversing for me back to healthier levels of like hydration and less toxins. I mean, alcohol is a toxin, and it is unfortunately what happens when you poison yourself. I don't know if you guys have watched The Queen's Gambit, but you remember when he calls her out and he says, like, you look like shit, basically? If you haven't watched Queen's Gambit, I would definitely recommend it. But there's a part where essentially the main character is struggling with substance abuse and specifically alcohol, and her face is just looking like worse and worse, and her eyes are getting yellow, which is a sign of liver failure and challenges with that. But that made me realize, as I've been observing myself the last like 4 months of like hardly as much alcohol, that things are kind of reversing for me. So that's kind of nice. I do like that a lot. So I would definitely say for cortisol dysregulation, you definitely want to reduce and or remove alcohol, again, especially during like the healing parts of your journey. So knowing that it doesn't have to be for everything for all time. For some people it does. Some people, if they realize that once they start they can't stop, that's okay. Maybe you just make a little decision on your own to stop in general. There's a bajillion awesome mocktails and stuff now available, so that's pretty great. Okay, so the last thing that a lot of people tend to recommend is partaking in calming activities or hobbies like hiking, painting, reading, sauna time, going to the beach, walking your dog. All that kind of stuff can be really good for managing your cortisol, as well as especially yoga, yin yoga, hatha yoga, some of the slower stuff, not quite as tiring and energetic as like vinyasa. Those would be my best tips for utilizing yoga for stress management, because you can really connect with your breath there. Your teachers usually cue you to really connect with your body and your breath, and you get to get everything flowing and release a lot of stress that tends to build up in our bodies. So I highly recommend yoga, and that's something that I've definitely brought back weekly into my routine, and it's been so beneficial for me. All right, now I want to tell you guys a little bit about what I'm doing that's a bit different than just the standard advice online. You can definitely find this advice online, but you're going to find it a lot more in kind of the functional, holistic wellness space, more than just kind of PubMed and all of that. Livestrong.com. Okay, so one of the big things that I'm doing nutritionally, or a couple of things that I'm focusing on, would be I'm increasing my omega-3s roughly to that 2,000 to 3,000 IUs range. So that's typically like 2 or 3 capsules instead of just one. And usually the standard serving is just one. But especially if you're somebody who has been struggling with chronic stress, we need a lot more omega-3 help than we think, especially nowadays. And a lot of people have gone back and forth about it. But I would say from what I've found the most is that most of our diets don't contain as many omega-3s as they do omega-6s, because you get omega-6s from a lot of the standard oils used in most cooking, chicken breast. There's a ton of common things we eat that are pretty high in omega-6s, but not a lot of things that we commonly eat that are high enough in omega-3s, because you want to have a higher ratio daily of omega-3 intake compared to your omega-6. So I personally already have a really good fish oil tab or pill that I take 2 of daily from Pure Encapsulations, but there's a lot of great companies out there that you can make sure that they are like third-party tested and good quality and they source responsibly. So definitely would recommend that. You can also go to my coachkels.com and click on my Amazon links for seeing what my top recommendations are. I only ever put stuff that I actually legitimately use or that my clients use on that list. So it's not a bunch of malarkey just thrown on the page. And the other thing that I do is I've been intentionally increasing my fiber intake, as well as my fermented, like probiotic rich foods. So my kimchi, sauerkrauts, yogurts, good quality yogurts, as well as miso and different foods that involve fermented soy. organic, ideally, as well as more berries, a lot more leafy greens. And, I pretty much always have like broccoli or asparagus or green beans in our dinners. So a good amount of those are increased in my daily diet, as well as a couple of like flax seeds and such, chia seeds. Those are great ways to increase that in your diet, support your gut health, because supporting your gut health is going to bleed into your cortisol regulation. So that's really important. And so that's why I'm kind of prioritizing those things roughly daily. I wouldn't say I eat them every single day perfectly, but I definitely have them at least 4 to 5 times a week in one of my meals at least, or a couple of meals. Another one that's kind of interesting is a really good technique is called progressive muscle relaxation. Sometimes people just call it PMR. And what that is you can start with a few deep breaths, tense every muscle group or individual muscle groups at a time throughout the body, and then relax it. And match it with breathing in when you're squeezing and breathing out when you relax. And there's a lot of research that shows that it's a great way to bring calming reaction to your body. And it also helps, kind of focus and bring yourself back in if you're feeling a little anxious or just stressed by something or distracted. And it brings you back in your body, really. But there's a lot of other things that can come from it where you can actually help a muscle that's kind of overactivated finally relax when you kind of try to engage that entire area of muscles. So I use that sometimes when I'm trying to kind of get back in my body, because it is helpful to refocus and feel that feeling of calming down and relaxing. Some other things that I like to implement when I do get stressful moments, honestly, I use this the most when I am getting like road rage from jerk face California drivers. And that would be like using kind of guided imagery or like happy place mindfulness, where essentially I think of something that is my happy place. Usually it involves like a beach, and stereotypically like in Hawaii, because my family has a ton of memories there. And it's one of those places where like I can think about all these different things that I like about there. So then I'll like bring myself to a higher vibe, a different place. And so that's a really good way for me to kind of manage it instead of just staying pissed off at this person and watching them tailgate me or whatever, So I would say that that's a really good technique. But mindfulness is a muscle. You have to flex it often. So you have to get to a position where when you think about being mindful, or you start to have just even like a flicker of, I should think about this, or why did this make me feel this way? Like you got to dive deep into that. You got to actually do the thing and think about it. And remember that mindfulness is observations of something without judgment. So mindfulness isn't just being like, I'm just going to be mindful and not give the guy the bird. It's more of like, why is this making me feel like I want to give him the bird? Like, is this beneficial for me and for him? Am I just trying to teach him a lesson? Am I trying to, flex one on him? Whatever it is, that's mindfulness. It's not just being like, I'm just going to be nice, because that's more of like shoving your feelings down and not actually observing why is it bringing up something to you. You know what I mean? And this is a good reminder that your triggers are your teachers. So if you're triggered by something, you gotta not push it on somebody else. This is a perfect time for you to become mindful and not be reactive and be like, why do I feel triggered by this incident or this thing somebody said or whatever? And that will really help you flex that muscle of mindfulness, like I was saying, because it helps you become more self-aware and hopefully work through and heal some of these things that are like chronically bothering you or keep coming up, all this different stuff. So for me, that's one of the big things that I have been working on, is in the moments that I have something trigger me or whatnot, I like to kind of unpack it with myself and not being afraid to, it's really important to do that. A little easy one that I tend to do that I've always liked to do ever since high school is chewing gum. I definitely like chewing gum, especially when I'm trying to think of something, or if I'm scripting stuff, or if I'm working on like the wellness newsletter, or just things that require some good focus. I like to chew on gum. It helps me focus better. And I guess it's passively stress relieving, because I used to like chew on my nails, which is totally a bad habit. You know what I mean? So another thing that can be very helpful when it's a stressful time is I like to throw on something of the comedy genre, or like just a straight up comedian on either Spotify if I want to get some laughs in the car, or if it's like on Netflix or something, I'll look up a favorite comedian or see if there's any new things of other comedians that I do like, or just favorite comedy movies and stuff that I enjoy. And bringing some laughter in is always going to help your stress levels. So focusing and centering yourself around funny moments, funny things, things that you enjoy that you like to laugh at, or people in your life that make you laugh, that's a really great way to help your cortisol. And that is absolutely what we've been doing. I'm a huge Brooklyn Nine-Nine fan. I think it's literally one of the funniest. Is it considered a sitcom? I'm not sure, but I love it so much. There's just so many funny things, even when I rewatch the episodes. So just find your favorite shows and kind of go back to them. And that'll be much better on you than watching like Yellowstone or Game of Thrones constantly, because those are heavy. Those are heavy shows, and they will incite physical things out of you. You know what I mean? Okay, so like a couple of the last few things that I like to do is I do actually have almost a daily bit of dark chocolate, usually 80% or like 78% or whatnot. Nothing usually less than that, because I really like dark chocolate, and you're going to get a lot more antioxidants and flavonoids that are in the cacao bean, and it can bring a lot of different health benefits that will help your body combat inflammation and increase your energy, decrease cortisol, and give you a little bit of that like kind of happy, sweet feeling, when you get that craving for something. And there's a lot of good things that can come from cocoa's flavanols, including like cognitive function and reducing risk of memory loss because of that. And so there's a lot of little things that having a little bit of daily dark chocolate is great for, but I would say like you're going to want to keep it to about an ounce or less of dark chocolate a day, because you don't want to obviously overdo it, because you can overdo everything. So that is a really important one. And of the last two things that I like to do is definitely sleeping more, and trying my best to. Honestly, it's been kind of weird the last several weeks where I've finally had more control over my mornings, because a lot of you guys used to know I used to commute down from Monterey to the Bay Area a couple times a week, and that was always exhausting and stressful. So now that I have my mornings kind of back to me, I've been hoping to just get into a really consistent sleep schedule, but like with the adrenal fatigue and then other stressors going on in my life right now, it's been way harder for me to get like happy, solid sleep for some reason. And it's a little bit frustrating, but I know it'll get better with time. And I really don't want to use sleep aids to get better quality sleep, because that's just never a good habit to build. But when I do, I usually am orienting the most towards magnesium and really light doses of melatonin from like trusted good quality sources, such as like pure encapsulations, where I'll usually do like 1 to max 3 grams of melatonin. You really don't want to go over that, because it's not always like perfectly regulated that it's exactly that amount of grams in there. And you really don't want to exceed like 5 milligrams, because it can reduce the amount of melatonin your body naturally produces, and that can be a problem. But that's why sunlight in the morning is really important, because it helps your internal body clock know when it's about time to start producing the melatonin to make you sleepy and help your sleep be deep sleep, because that's really key. That's where you get a lot of recovery, is in your deep sleep. So for me, I try to optimize those things. I found a really interesting product that I tasted and tried. I wouldn't say I love the taste of it, but I had some bomb sleep that night, and it was the Magnesium. What brand is it called? I need to look for it again, and I'll put it in the show notes for you guys if you're curious. But that one it got me some real good quality sleep, and it helped me wind down and drop into like a more chill state. I drank it like 2 hours before bed, and so that was amazing. I'm going to go search and get myself some again now, because I'm like needing it, that's for sure. But I would say sleeping more is so massively helpful. And the really big one that I would say is having strong boundaries on work-related admin stuff. For me, I mean, this might be more unique to people who are entrepreneurs or have their own business or operate in a company similar to that. But anybody can say that they will have the better results for their health with not having that constantly checking your emails, responding to emails haphazardly in between your workday. Pick clear blocks where you will spend time answering emails or doing other things. And I actually just put them into my Google Calendar, and I make sure I'm doing my best to stick to it in that moment. But it is really hard to say no to that moment where my hand just wants to check my emails. You know what I mean? So working on that right now is really important for me because I am also prioritizing super extra downtime. So this is weird for me and really hard for me. And probably a lot of you who have been hyperactive and hyperproductive overachievers your whole life is actually just setting aside time for leisure, doing nothing, just being a potato maybe. What I've been liking to do is just kind of relax on the patio with my dog in the sunshine. I'm trying to find more good leisure books to read. I started to realize all I was reading was nonfiction that was really it was about body fat or about nutrition on your brain, all this different stuff. And I was like, hold on, I haven't really read just a story for fun in a long time. So doing that is really important, and carving out time to be okay, good, I'm going to go read a couple more chapters. I'm going to exist for about 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. There's been times where I've even cut out the whole rest of the day, especially when my fiance's home, to go to the beach, play with our dog, and go get a coffee and, this or that. And it's been so immensely helpful for me just letting myself have leisure like that and not letting myself feel guilty. And it's really hard to navigate that balance with work. But I think the best thing for me, at least with my learning style or operating style, is I need to have it in my calendar, and then I need to just kind of honor it and do what is in my calendar, as much as I can. And so those are the things that I would say have been really helpful for me with managing my cortisol so far. And I will definitely check back in with you guys in the summer about where my cortisol has been going, if things have been improving, especially with my hormones and such, because I actually have really low testosterone, really low DHEAs, and those are produced by the adrenal glands and converted based off of my internal state. And that would make sense why I'm not recovering well at the gym, and I'm not as resilient, and I don't have as much energy, and I don't have a libido. All these different things are definitely coming because of those imbalances. So it's very key that I get that stuff on point as much as I can. So I'm always going to be taking you guys on that journey, of course, because I think it's important for all my other ladies out there who are struggling with the same stuff. All right, Rebel, that is it for today's conversation. I hope it was helpful for you. Share this episode with somebody you think needs to chill out. And I hope that you can enjoy the beautiful weather that's heading our way now that we're into May. But I will say, as always, celebrate your strength and nourishment, walk with confidence, and I'll catch you next week on another episode of Rebel Wellness. Hey Rebel, I just want to say a huge thank you for tuning in and sharing this space with us. Before we sign off, I've got some exciting ways for you to stay connected and to take your wellness journey even further with me. First up, if you haven't already, make sure to swing by CoachKales.com and sign up for our newsletter. It's your go-to source for the latest episodes, exclusive content, and a whole lot more wellness goodness delivered straight to your inbox. Check out the show notes for those high-quality tips on nutrition, fitness, and just overall well-being. Follow us on Instagram at Rebel Wellness Podcast and my flagship page at Kaylee Loren. We're all about building a community where we can share, inspire, and grow together. So I would love to see you there. Now, if you're looking to reset and realign after a vacation, a hectic work season, or just because you feel like it's time for a healthful cleanse, I've got something super special for you, and it's 100% free. Head over to stan.store/Kales and download my free realignment detox guide. You can also find it at coachkale.com in the freebies section. I'm sharing my unique holistic approach to help you cut back inflammation, improve your skin, and even shed some excess weight with this guide. So trust me, you're going to love it. Go download it for free now. But last but not certainly least, if you've got a burning health question you'd like answered on the show, or if you're curious about my one-on-one remote coaching or group courses, don't hesitate to visit my website and reach out to me there, or hello@kayleeloren.com is my best email for contacting me. I am here to support you on your journey to wellness, so do not feel afraid to reach out. All right, Rebel. Catch you on the next episode.